Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com. Here once again is in my apartment. Sorry about that, but welcome back to our midweek follow-up video. I like to call these Stumped Q&A. And sitting next to me, I have a guest. Tom, tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Tom. I run the Woodshop Nerdery YouTube channel. I'm a big fan of My Growth Rings. I watch every video, make a comment on every video. I love seeing all of your comments on the video as well. So thank you for that. Over at Woodshop Nerdery, the reason I started the channel is basically out of a frustration with other woodworking YouTube channels. I was frustrated that the channel didn't go into enough content or enough detail. That's why I really like My Growth Rings and the multiple series of videos Scott does. The other thing
You're more scientific about what you do. I'm super impressed by your approach.
Yeah, I like to go into just a little more detail, go into a little more data about the topic that I'm working with. I'm a software developer by trade. We work with data all the time. I find it fascinating. And I saw a lack of that on YouTube and decided to try to pitch in.
Fantastic. Well, I've really enjoyed your channel. I don't know if I caught it, if I was one of your earlier subscribers, but as soon as you came on my radar, I jumped on in, and you put out great content. So the reason why I thought about inviting Tom to this conversation, we're here to follow up on the video introducing the Shopsmith Mark IV, brand new, stripped down, shorter version that could eventually, for an owner, evolve into a full-blown Mark V if they like. And Tom, along with a few other people that happen to be channel members of my channel, shared some really great insights, not only with me there, but also on the Facebook Shopsmith owners group. And there's some conversation going on over at the Shopsmith forums, lots of places to have conversation about Shopsmith tools. And I thought, this would be fun to get a couple perspectives on this machine. But let me share my screen, and we're going to jump on over into the questions that came up. Just as a reminder, there is the Mark IV. Okay, so just quick glance, as I mentioned in the original video, it kind of has the chassis of a Mark V model 510 and 520, the same carriage here with the crank. Same tabletop as a 510 and a 520, but it has the extruded aluminum fence rails of the 520. But that's it. You don't get a miter gauge, you don't get a saw blade, you don't get a guard, you don't get a rip fence until you add those on. Now, the thing is, if you don't need those things, then you don't add those on. So there's some I think maybe some wisdom in this, but let's jump over to my channel, kind of the back room here, and we'll click on the comments of this bit. Oh, let's go back. Let's go back to this. Yeah, okay, no, look what this video has earned me, Tom. Estimated revenue, 24 cents.
Wow. So, okay.
Yeah, okay, look at that. Look how that video is performing as compared to the normal video of mine. So it's but had great viewership. Not disappointed in that, but somebody's making money. But let's go on into the comments. And I was mentioning to Tom that I think maybe because I'm using a couple add-on pieces of software here that help me kind of search through. It's kind of like putting a pivot table in a spreadsheet. I can click on this filter and I can select just the comments that contain questions. In other words, question marks. And we can scroll through here and make sure we address all the questions. And you can see that one's from 6 hours ago. Let's go down to the bottom and we can start with the earlier ones. Hey, there's one from a guy from Woodshop Nerdery. So Graham jumped in real early because he's in the UK, and I think he was up before the rest of you. I posted this at like 2 a.m. He says, so if the standard Mark V is 72 inches long, the tubes are shortened 72 inches. Okay, Yeah, so I think he worked all this out himself. There's no real question here. So really what they've done is they've taken the main way tubes, the upper tubes, and the lower bench tubes, and they've shortened that to shorten the footprint. The way they described it, they described the overall footprint of the machine. And that confused a few people because they thought that number was the length of the tubes. It's like, well, that's not much shorter. Now, the whole machine is shorter as a result. And then Tom, you jumped in here and said, asked about double tilt, saying that the picture seems to indicate it has the double tilting feature, but what good is that going to do us really without adding something like the speed increaser or the Power Pro headstock? You want to address why that would, one of those other things would be important for routing?
Well, I think with the double tilt, you can operate under table routing with a mechanical headstock, assuming you're paying attention to the bit direction. But it's not going to spin at the 10,000 RPM that a Power Pro would, or the 10,000 RPM that a speed increaser would. So yes, there's maybe a narrow band of joinery you could route in that situation, but it's maybe not worth it with the mechanical headstock to have a double tilt anyway.
Tom and I have actually had this debate in a few comment threads, because here's the thing: if what you're doing is putting a rabbet along the long grain edge to recess a back on a cabinet,
right,
fine, you can do it at that speed, not a problem. But if what you're doing is going cross grain, making a dado, making a rabbet across the grain, it can be a rough ride at 5,200 RPMs.
yeah.
So.
Well, it would be nice to have the double tilt in terms of upgradability, because if this is a starter package and you wanted to eventually add on to it to get to a Mark 7, then you would be starting with the double tilt, and it'd be one less upgrade you'd have to do.
That's a really good point. All right, so let's move on. And another comment that had a question says, can't you just get shorter tubes? I would convert one of mine to a shorty. Yeah, if you own a Mark V, you can shorten your Mark V. And if you don't want to cut your tubes, you can buy new tubes or buy somebody else's old tubes. Shopsmith's target here is not you or I who own a Shopsmith. It really isn't, although there'll be some people that'll buy one as a secondary tool. That's really not the goal here. And I commented on here about how, Shopsmith for a couple years now has offered this thing called the Shop Deputy, which is basically some short tubes, and you basically take the legs off of your Mark V, build a cabinet or a base, mount those bases closer together, and use the shorter tubes for the way tubes. So you can buy short tubes already. I'm not exactly sure that that's the way I would go. If you were going to cut one down, Tom, would you cut your Mark V's tubes, or would you find another set?
There's no way I would cut my tubes. I just think that table, putting out that long table, that long rip and cross cut capacity, that's the reason I actually bought my system, was that big table capacity. If I were to do a short,
that too.
What's that?
You've pushed that. You've done some pretty interesting work. Your crosscut video where you were cutting a big panel, and sliding it across a table that was as big as any industrial table saw I've ever seen.
Yeah,
made from a Mark V.
Yeah, I just added the plywood outriggers to the tube system, and it supported everything. And I made quite a few cabinets that way.
Fantastic. A few more comments. Some people saying they would buy them on eBay. Graham jumped back in once again, said that you could buy stainless steel tubes from a metal supplier in the UK for $120 total, including shipping. So yeah, that's the way to do it. If you've got a Mark V you want to shorten, sounds like a great solution to me. Here's the thing about just buying tubes off the shelf is Are the walls thick enough? Is it hard enough to be able to withstand the clamping that takes place? Shopsmith has done a lot of experimentation over the years with different materials, and even some of the products that they okayed, they eventually moved away from. And, you know, they know what they're doing. Me jumping on eBay is not necessarily going to give me satisfactory results. David said, with all the much cheaper used Shopsmith availables, why pay almost $3,000? And then, okay, Thomas, this guy was able to get a Mark V, a dust collector, a planer, and lots of extras for $200. And the customer loaded it in his car for him and gave
Yep.
him $100 for gas.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some interesting stories out there. I think it's interesting. Everybody always tells the story of the best deal they ever got. No one ever tells the story of the time they overpaid on the used marketplace. But
I mean, great.
We've become really used to low prices in the used market for Shopsmith. In fact, if you look at these used Shopsmith systems on the used market, they're so low that even if you like go to eBay and you know, you'll pay more to buy a bandsaw alone than you will to buy, you know, a bandsaw and a Shopsmith and a bunch of other stuff.
Yep.
So
I wrote 2 blog posts years ago. They're the 2 most popular landing pages on my blog. One is how to buy a used Mark V, and the other one was how to sell a used Mark V. And at the end of each of them, I say, by the way, you might want to read what I'm telling the people that are buying these, right? So go check out this comment. And you know, if I were buying a Mark V and wanted to buy used, was comfortable buying used, and basically going to go for the lowest price, you better believe I would be on Craigslist and trolling the Facebook marketplace, understanding that if you don't know anything about a Mark V, you might end up with a dog. We see here in North Carolina machines that were underwater on the coast during the last hurricane. And you really got to know what you're looking for to make sure you're not going to get somebody else's anchor. But if I were selling a Mark V, I'd be on eBay right now and I would part the thing out, not necessarily part it out as, you know, here's a table, here's a carriage, but the bandsaw would sell separately, the joiner would sell separately. And that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. You add up the cost of what things go for on eBay, and they're dramatically more valuable than the people that are out shopping for them on Craigslist than they think they are. So,
yeah, I think the used market is artificially low. You know, for what you get, all the value that you get out of these systems, you know, to think that they go for $200 or $500 is really amazing. I think that should really be pulling new people into the Shopsmith world.
Yeah.
They just need to understand what they're getting.
I agree with you on that. And you know, the reason why in the world that you work in, you understand, you know, the world changed from the days that Magna introduced the Shopsmith tools. Now we have the internet. And so when somebody had a Mark V in their basement in Connecticut, I never knew about it in North Carolina. Right. Now I can find out about that. And, you know, nobody predicted eBay or Craigslist or how about 3D printing? Right. You know, all those Mark 7s that were no good because they had melted plastic parts suddenly become viable again.
Yep.
You know, and dirt cheap Asian tools. You know, you couldn't in the days of Magna, you couldn't buy a table saw, a drill press, a boring machine, a disc sander, and all those things for less than you could buy a Mark V.
Right.
Now you can. Now, I don't think they're equal quality.
No way.
At those capacities, they're certainly not.
No way.
Yeah. John here was one of several people who noted that price, you don't get wheels, you don't get casters. No, you don't get casters, and there's usually 1/4 of the year where Shopsmith has a package where they include their startup kit. It's the chisels, it's the faceplate, it's a set of drill bits, and the casters, and a package of assorted sandpaper. So kind of the first thing most people buy. But guess what the Mark V costs? When you buy it during that quarter of the year, you pay retail for the Mark V or the Mark 7. And then other quarters of the year, there's a quarter where they'll have a promotion where you get your choice of add-on accessory. You want the bandsaw, or do you want the joiner? Do you want, okay? So you kind of have to watch the promotions on it. And there is a quarter of the year where you get casters. And there's 3 quarters of the year where you pay for casters. And this is true and has been true forever. And if you buy the Pro Planer, back when they sold the Pro Planer, when you bought any of the single or special purpose tool stands, if you wanted casters, they were always extra. By the way, did you get the clearance email this week from Shopsmith?
I did. I looked through it just about an hour ago. I noticed they had a set of casters on there for a phenomenal price.
Yes, they do. Let me show you my receipt for a set of casters. I jumped on that immediately. Even with shipping, that comes in about half price.
Yeah.
So that's a great deal. Now, I could have bought them used somewhere.
Sure. Yeah. And
I will.
Yeah, $15 and 3M pads and WD-40 later, they'd be usable, right?
And I will be replacing those wheels.
Yeah.
For sure. When's the release date? I don't know. I don't know any more than you do on that. And what I do know is typically Shopsmith, when they launch a product like this, or when they relaunch a product, as they had with a couple accessories that they brought back for a period, they're typically, getting a sense for the market. If nobody orders one, this thing will go away quietly. But if there are folks in line, yeah, the thing about it is every single part is something they have.
Right.
So it's not like the Mark I where they made special castings for the machine. People think the Mark I is fake. It's a myth. Tim says, so do they still, so they still sell the old belt headstock, the old mechanical headstock. That was a surprise. Well, they kind of retired it, but to me, it's kind of smart that they are putting it back on the shelf, because not only do you have the price point advantage of being able to sell a mechanical version against the Power Pro, you also then have a built-in supply of parts that you can sell to people that need those. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Were you surprised to see it had a mechanical headstock on it?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I was under the impression you could still buy a 520 with a mechanical headstock. I mean, at least according to the Shopsmith webpage.
Yeah,
So,
so
and if it was a purely emotional decision, I would have had a Power Pro, in my garage already, but I'm fighting the logic. I can't really place what extra the Power Pro gives me that I can't already do. I mean, it sounds like it's more convenient. It sounds like it's more, slightly more powerful, but from an end use standpoint, I'm not sure that I buy anything.
Yeah. Well, what I would have picked up from adding a Power Pro would be functions that I'd already solved.
Right.
Right. Because I can do the things I can do with my variable speed 3.5 horsepower plunge router that's in a router table. So I have that. So you're saying my Mark V could now run those same cutters at half their speed?
Probably not.
I'm not sold. I was a beta tester of it, and what blew my mind was the power. So being able to cut full 13/16 inch dados in hardwood, and to be able to resaw 6-inch oak with there was no slowdown whatsoever on that saw. That's not something I was used to. You typically, when ripping hardwood, you might run the speed down a little bit, so you pick up a little bit of torque, and then you take your time pushing, and you get some burning. None of that happens with the Power Pro. That's really nice. So, Maybe they'll have a sale one of these days. We can pick one up. All right, so those were the questions. Let's get rid of the questions box here and see what else. I think again, most of the comments on here had to do with, hey, I can buy a used machine, and people are kind of crazy to spend that kind of money. And I think from here we can maybe talk about who is the audience.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else here, so I'll stop sharing my screen. Who do you think the audience is for this, Tom?
Well, I think it's the person who's getting into woodworking, or maybe they bought their first Harbor Freight table saw, on whatever sale that Harbor Freight offers, and they realize they're disappointed with it, and they're deciding what to go to next. And looking at the top of the line Mark 7 versus this, it is $2,000 less, and that's going to expose it to a whole new market potential. Will it work? Will it be a success? Who really knows? But I think anytime you can lower your base price, you open up your potential market. So it could be a smart move. Only time will tell.
I mean, it's certainly not, and none of the Mark 5, Mark 7s are the tool for the 17-year-old who can't scrape together gas money. That's never been the target market for that. And that guy or gal who wants to get into woodworking is going to try to find one at a garage sale, and if they're lucky, they'll get one. And that happens from time to time. It's always been, when I was an academy instructor, easily half of the audience that would come for classes were professionals.
Really?
These were oh yeah, I had doctors, I had attorneys. I had a surgeon, a dental surgeon, that was one of the original inventors of implanted teeth. This was back in the 80s when that was all super innovative. And the thought of a person like that, who's this is their livelihood, that they would get involved in woodworking, but to him this was a release. It was something that didn't require a lot of his mind, except for, of course, focusing on safety. And I think about what's the used market for a Rolex, Rolex Mariner or Oyster or one of those, a watch that you can buy new for only 12,000. You could probably get used for about 8. Why would anybody buy a new one?
Right. Well, I was thinking about this earlier today when I was preparing for this meeting. Looking at all the package, so for $2,778, you get the new base, a new headstock, and my machine's 30 years old. It's a 91, so it's one of the first C-type 510s. And it shows its age. It's a little bit fuzzy around the corners. So to have a nice crisp table and a nice crisp set of tubes and a brand new headstock, that would be pretty nice. And if you're already a Shopsmith owner and you want to add a second machine, well, you already have all the other accessories, so you don't need any of those other packages.
That's true.
So boom, here's a nice crisp new system, and you can leave one set up. If you have something set up with a precise table saw fence setting and you need to drill a hole, you could set the shorty up over here in the drill press. So
like me, you own a power station.
Yes.
In fact, you converted your power station to a wannabe crafter station.
Yeah. It was fun. It was actually more fun to make the conversion than to actually use it as a table saw.
I have both. I have a crafter station and I have a power station. So, there's a machine that Shopsmith came out with that was, let's say, for the power station, like in the $400 range. And what did it do? It powered accessories, and that's it. You couldn't turn on it. You couldn't drill with it. You couldn't saw with it. You couldn't sand with it. Well, maybe you could sand with it, but when and then it's nowhere near as robust as putting your accessories on the Mark V,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we lived with that. But if you took a Mark V owner with all the accessories who just wanted something to primarily power their accessories, you mount your joiner on that or your bandsaw, leave the joiner on your Mark V, you know, put the bandsaw over there. You can leave the sanding disc on it or drum sander or whatever, and you got a neat little setup there. You have
Right.
4 different functions between those two machines.
Yeah.
Which, hey, the same is true of a shorty. The same is true of a do-it-yourself cut down Mark V, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some advantages to that, but no casters, huh?
Hey, I think the casters is a good point. Everything in my shop is on wheels. It's got
Yeah.
to roll away. It's got to roll out of the way.
Did you buy the big green red upgraded polyurethane casters?
Yeah, I did, and I absolutely love them. I know you don't like them,
I
but
don't.
when I bought those, our garage floor was actually dished like a cereal bowl. We've since had it entirely redone, and it was very pitted. And to get that Mark V to move around that terrible concrete was just a mess. And so when I upgraded to those big red casters, it just rolled over everything.
Yeah.
So I'm not sorry I did the upgrade. It
So okay,
really was a game changer.
let me tell you my complaint, and I need to do a video, and the video will be to take the casters off. I still have them on there, and because I've been moving that around, and it's going to go to the new shop whenever we get that set up, I'll leave them on. I don't like the height of the pedal. I don't
Yeah.
like that the pedals have moved up. I like using a Mark V with an accessory shelf on it. So
Mm,
now I have to basically have my foot all the way up against the accessory shelf to be able to
yeah.
reach in and step on the dang
Yeah.
pedal.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just muscle memory of all these years of using it in the original location. I just can't get around that.
Right. Right.
But if I could have had that same rolling action without making any change like that, I certainly would have done that.
Mhm.
So those other polyurethane wheels that I found on Amazon, I've been really pleased with those. So that's
Okay.
what I will be putting on my power station with my new casters I just bought.
Okay.
My crafter station has casters, but the power station did not come with casters, so I need to get that up.
Speaking
Well,
of
was there? Yeah, go ahead.
speaking of the power station, I really can't imagine how it, when I got that, it completely changed my woodworking workflow. I'm at least 3 times as productive. I can leave the bandsaw on it, the belt sander. So it's not an insignificant thing to have an additional source of power for those special purpose
Yeah,
tools. It really
yeah,
isn't.
that's true. And you learned the lesson not to run a joiner on it, right?
I didn't have to learn that lesson. I read your blog before I even owned a power station, and I
All
already
right.
knew not to try it.
Good, good. If you don't know what we're talking about, the top speed of the power station is nowhere near the speed that a joiner is driven off of that lower spindle on the Mark V. So that just frees my Mark V up to run a joiner all the time. And then
Mhm.
all of my accessories I typically run on the power station. And then the joiner is there. I mentioned an anchor earlier. In a good way, it's an anchor. It dampens vibration when I'm turning. It gives me something to really hold the machine down when I go to the drill press position and all that. So you could weld that joiner on as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
So, all right. Well, I think we've answered the questions, and I think we've beaten this dead horse. Yeah, you make your own decisions on this. You know, that's kind of the beauty of this. You do what makes sense to you and makes sense to your wallet. And it really doesn't matter what we think. So if you want to buy used tools and go it alone, that's fantastic. I love to hear people being able to, bring tools back from the brink. And if you want to buy new tools, that's fantastic. Somebody please help Shopsmith keep their lights on because I'm going to need them someday for something. So, all right. Tom, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate this. It's been fun having you here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. See you this weekend. In the meantime, make it a great day.